Need for Speed Heat looked to recapture some of that magic. Its neon-infused Miami Vice aesthetic signaled the return of the creativity that made the series a hit. It is neither the most realistic nor most precise driving game we've had, but as an arcade racer, it's fun. One of Heat's best features is the day and night separation, allowing you to flip between sanctioned road racing during the daytime and illegal street racing by night. Both races include different rule sets and different rewards, with day races giving you bank, which is apparently the cool way to say cash, which you use to purchase new cars, customization options, or new car parts, while night races level up your rep and give you the chance to unlock an ultimate level performance part for your car. Biggest difference between the day and night is the cops. Because the day races are legal, cops will not come to arrest you, while racing at night, you will have cops chasing you almost constantly. Having both options allows you to choose which playstyle fits you best. If you enjoy higher intensity and more risk, then night is where you will spend your time. If you prefer to race on tracks with no traffic, then day is where you will spend most of your time. I initially didn't know what to think of the manual time change feature in Need for Speed Heat, but I did enjoy being able to focus on what objectives or goals I needed to complete. It made for a great mix of both street racing and more traditional racing that I could tailor my own game to. Night racing is where the game differentiates itself from most of the recent titles. The rep system raises the stakes and creates a rewarding but difficult risk-reward system. As you continue to complete more races during the night, you will continue to raise your rep and your heat level. It's like a game show and you're the contestant. Do you take what you have and be comfortable with your prize, or do you go all in one too many rounds and risk losing it? I was surprised with how well the rep system was in Need for Speed Heat. As you raised your heat level, the chases get harder, and especially in the early game, they were just about impossible. Some players complained early on before they nerfed the cops that the chases were way too hard at heat level 5, and personally I understand the complaints. At times it could feel like you had Jason Bourne, John Wick, and the whole Fast and Furious crew coming after you. But personally, I welcome the challenge. A game is only rewarding if you fail a bunch of times first. Once you unlocked higher level cars and learned the best spots to lose the cops, it did get easier, but that is exactly how it should feel as you progress the game. The only downside was how limited the ways you could lose the cops were. The health bar on your car was so low it made it almost impossible to bash into the police cars and still get away. The easiest way to lose the cops was the jumps on the map. When you had all the cops following you, you go to a ramp and jump that they cannot follow, and sometimes they would even crash. I would have liked more variety in escape tactics without abusing the cops' inability to make a jump. Luckily, the way the cars and parts were tied into progression made it flow smoothly instead of having the best car within the first hour. To unlock the best car parts, you had to complete races locked behind either heat level 3 or heat level 5. To be able to compete in that tier of race and still evade the cops, you needed better cars. To unlock better cars, you had to raise your rep level to have the option to purchase some of the cars. But let's be honest, none of that matters if the physics and driving itself is not enjoyable. Luckily for Need for Speed Heat, they nailed it. And before I get the comments about how unrealistic the physics are, yes, I understand and I agree, but this is an arcade racer. It's not supposed to be a simulation racer. I played games like Gran Turismo 7 where you must hit the apex in specific corners to keep speed. Need for Speed Heat is not that game. Although it may have some of those features in certain races, Heat is a game that is continually high speed and keeps you engaged at all times, whether it's barely dodging oncoming traffic or figuring out how to take a corner in a split second. The speed is always noticeable. A lot of that comes from the design of the game, whether it's the way they used motion blur or just the speed at which you pass other cars. The effects give you the impression that you are flying at the speed of light. In Heat, you won't use the brake mechanics very often, as once you unlock better cars, the handbrake becomes your best friend. Like I said before, The physics are not realistic, especially when it comes to the ability to stop within 50 feet from full speed and make a 90-degree turn with the handbrake. It's definitely an arcade approach to the mechanics that's easier to handle for players not familiar with racing games. The streets themselves were challenging to navigate at times, and experience in different areas of the map was noticeable in the ability to finish races without crashing. Unfortunately, gauging the difficulty of each race was an impossible task. I like the idea of having each individual AI have their own difficulty level based off of their car's performance, but the game does a really bad job of laying out how hard a race will be. At times, you could have a recommended performance level, but when you actually race, there is an AI that is way higher than recommended level, which makes it extremely hard, if not impossible, to beat that AI. On the other flip side, you could join a race and have every car be under the recommended performance level. Then you end up winning by a mile, and it's not very fun. An easy way to fix the issue would have been to show us the highest performance car in the race. That way, I can choose how close to the limit I want to be based off of my own skill level. Luckily, the further you get into the game, you no longer have to deal with that, as the highest recommended is 400 performance. So once you have a car that is 400 and you do a 400 recommended race, it's just about even at all times. And when the races are even, they are a lot of fun. Now, just a side note, I have seen some complaints about the tailing missions in the beginning of the game. I guess it is relative to driving, since you were supposed to be a follow and drive the speed limit, but I honestly think that adds to the realism of street culture. Showing off cars and cruising is a big part of car culture, and I think it adds a different element of race culture into the game. The biggest part of car culture is, well, the car and heat delivered. As usual for a Need for Speed game, the customization is some of the best. There are 127 cars to choose from in Heat, and all with their own customization options. The only downside is creating the full car vinyls yourself from scratch, since there is no full vinyl to choose from. Luckily, if you have an online connection, you can use the community wraps from other players, and you could put one on in a second. With performance upgrades, there are options for each type of race, whether you want the car to be a drift car, off-road car, or just a normal road car. You can change your tires, you can even change your engines, and everything else to make your car into your dream car. Now, Need for Speed Heat looks spectacular. The graphics are some of the best we've had, especially the nighttime, which is completely captivating. The city is built for a racer, with winding roads and stunning colors, which perfectly encapsulates the neon vibe that Need for Speed Heat was going for. But there are still a couple annoyances I had while playing the game. One is the rain. I mean, why does it always have to be raining? It feels like the majority of the time the world is raining, which is annoying since that was my least favorite part. The second is just how dead the map is. I mean, we're talking about Miami. You're telling me it's extremely hot and dry, and it's in Miami, and there's not one person on the beach? Did they really just stop having people in the city altogether? That's the type of deadness I would expect from Miami in a game like The Last of Us or some other apocalyptic game, not a racing game. Cruising down the streets of Miami with crowds of people everywhere is more of how I pictured the city to feel and look. Instead, it's just another city in an open world video game. Somewhere in production, the developers lost track of the vibe, as they call it, and changed the whole direction of the game. Instead of focusing on what the real Miami would feel like, they decided that the focus was needed on the characters to be hip or trendy to the younger generation, and made characters feel like they came right out of making TikToks.
It's been up 5 minutes and we already got hundreds of views.
Even the 12 preset characters we get to choose from all look like knockoff fake influencers. Could one of them look normal, please? The developers don't give enough credit to the younger generation. There's more to Gen Z than followers and vibes, as they call them. To see characters talk about trendy topics or how many views something got gets really annoying. Let's build a game with some substance, let the characters act naturally. On top of dull side characters, Ghost gave us one of the worst soundtracks in a Need for Speed game, if not in any game. I get that we are going for a theme here, but they chose not only the wrong theme, but also chose the worst SoundCloud versions of the genre. If you're going to give us rap, at least give us some good songs, not my NBA 2K characters' hot garbage.
I am my starting five, all I need is me. Like a kindergarten teacher, I'm giving L's for free.
Throw in some Miami by Will Smith or Move to Miami by Enrique Iglesias and Pitbull, just to name a few. The fact that the game is based off of Miami and has no Enrique Iglesias, Pitbull, DJ Khaled, Camila Cabello, or literally any other of the popular Miami artists is honestly a disgrace. Maybe that was too hard of a task for copyright and payment reasons, so I would have settled for more relaxing lo-fi synth waves or more chill beats. I should never want to turn off music in a game and go to YouTube for a playlist. The soundtrack should be in line with the game I'm playing. If what you are looking for in a racing game is a meaningful and fulfilling story, then run as far away from Need for Speed Heat as possible. Racing games have shown the ability to have strong narratives over the year, but for some reason, Ghost decided it would be a good idea to make the game an off-brand Fast and Furious. Don't get me wrong, I like the idea of switching up the antagonist from another racer or crew and instead making the antagonist the police. But Heat is predictable and boring. Great ideas, just bad execution. When I look at a story in any game, I look for immersion into the fantasy. The problem with Heat is the separation from the premise of the story and what actually happens. The opening scene shows the police as this brutal, no-nonsense force that will do anything to take down street racers. But it's just not that compelling. On top of that, nothing ever gets done. As much as I liked the switch to the police antagonist, there was still that sense of racing rival missing. Instead of racing feeling like the centerpiece of the story, it almost felt like a piece of side content. Now, it doesn't help that the story ends when you think it's setting up the third act. I've heard rumors that Ghost had plans for a sequel, which would have made more sense, but honestly, unless you are 100% surefired for a sequel, I think wrapping up the story within the same game is always a safer option. After you're running with Shaw, the story just rushes to the end. When the story ends, there's no real satisfaction and you are left feeling empty. The only real closure about Shaw we get in the endgame is through a missable phone call I would have never heard if I didn't first see it online. None of the characters are truly memorable, the dialogue and cutscenes feel forced, and the tension is so bad it feels like it was written by a 5-year-old. All of the conflicts seem extremely artificial and placed specifically for our story purposes. I know the focus of racing games is on the racing, and that's fine. But if you're going to add in a story that's more than just racing other crews or rivals, go all in. It's like they had this really good idea, but then decided to just stop halfway. I do feel bad for Ghost, because I've seen rumors of a lot more cutscenes and cut content because of time constraints. It's unfortunate when you have good ideas and the management just doesn't give you enough time to produce the content. I mean, we had all of that league buildup, and then we just never even met them. Torres just basically took Mercer's place. I believe Mercer was supposed to have the Polestar at the end instead of the M3, which would have been a lot more interesting story perspective. The showdown story is pretty much useless besides providing us with races during the day. I don't believe that racing games can't have good stories, or that I should expect less from these titles. With any Need for Speed game with an open world, the events and variety of content is important to the replayability factor of the game, especially in a game with such a short story. In Heat, you had races, on and off road, drift trials, time trials, billboards, flamingos, street art, drift zones, long jumps, and speed traps. So as you can imagine, if you want to unlock every car or customization hidden behind the collectibles, it will take some time. The good news, if you don't care about the car locked behind them or getting the trophies themselves, you can just skip them altogether and focus on what you enjoy. If you plan on unlocking every car and upgrading each one of them, you will have plenty of hours ahead of you since you will need a good amount of cash to do so. The only complaint I have about the endgame is the lack of a competition or tournament. I know it may be asking for a lot, but I would have liked to have some sort of competition to enter, where maybe you put some money in, you get to race for higher stakes. It could be a way to unlock more cars fast if you are skilled, but also it helps switch up the content. They would have higher level racers now that you are in the league, possibly custom decal packs for you to win from the tournaments. Maybe I am asking for too much, but to me that would bring in a lot more replayability value than just repeating the races that bring in the most cash. Instead, I spent most of my time replaying the resort circuit inside the speedway when I needed cash because it was always easy and fast to complete. The multiplayer in Heat is one of the coolest ways I've seen it implemented in racing games. It allows the player to free roam in the open world, and you can see other players roaming around as well or doing races. I think it's an awesome addition to the game. It really shows at nighttime how hectic it would be for cops to be trying to stop all of the speeding and racing at once. Being able to bring your new custom car to cruise with your friends and race is everything I would want from a racing game. Unfortunately for me, I don't have a lot of friends who play racing games, so I didn't get to use the feature as much as I would have liked. Playing with randoms can still be somewhat fun, but as with most multiplayer games, having someone to play with is a big help. The only negative I have to multiplayer is no ability to join a loading lobby from either the menu or somewhere in game. I'm sure the reasoning would be because then players would have no reason to free roam multiplayer lobbies as much, and most players would just opt in to join races from the loading screen. The biggest problem I find with the open world lobbies is finding a variation of races. If you are playing with randoms, it may be hard to find players who want to continually switch up races, which is why a menu that randomizes races would work a lot easier. A lot of times I will join an online lobby, and as I try to load into a race, players just don't accept it and they're just not interested. Most players do either the oval race in the speedway or a couple of the other races, but a lot of them don't get touched. And it's no one's fault. Not everyone has the same enjoyment, not everyone has the same goals. As many good features as there was in Need for Speed Heat, it just seems like there is something missing. As much fun as driving around the game is, I just never felt fulfillment that I would want out of any game I play. But at the end of the day, Need for Speed Heat is one of the best arcade racing games we have gone in years. Not that there's that much competition in it. Sure, the story does leave some to be desired, but the racing is fun, and that's all that really matters. Overall, if someone has had no experience with the Need for Speed franchise and comes across Heat, I think it's a good representation for the franchise. You get the customization you want, the racing that does not obey the laws of physics, and that's all I can really ask for from Need for Speed at this point. I still keep out hope for a game to come where Need for Speed truly finds its roots, but until that point, we get to play these games. If you did enjoy the video, drop a like and subscribe. Check out some of my other long-form retrospective videos, and I will see you guys next time.